what a photo choice here by producer Cope. We're taking a look at the top Miami Dolphins GM candidates for the 2026 season because Miami fired Chris Grier on Friday. Hallelujah! But now they got to find their next man, and hopefully he's better than Chris Grier. I'll go through some options that I think the Dolphins would take a look at. I'm Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. Chris Grier looks very happy in that photo. I'm pretty happy he's fired. And I know you say, don't ever root for another man to lose his job. Well, when you're in the sports industry, you signed up for that. So hit that thumbs up icon because I'm fired up. Grier's gone, and hopefully you are too. Well, obviously, the new GM is Champ Kelly, at least in the interim. He will handle the reins until the end of the season. He was actually hired back in March of 2025 by Miami to serve as the senior personnel executive. He has never worked for the Dolphins organization prior to this last March. He was the assistant GM for the Raiders in 2022 to 2024 and actually served as interim GM for them in 2023 when they ultimately fired Ziegler and Josh McDaniels. He started his career as a scout in 2007, and this is a GM candidate that I truly do believe has a shot. Obviously, he has the inside track early because he has a working relationship with Stephen Ross already. Listen, there's no guarantee he ultimately holds the position past just the next 3 months, if you will, when they ultimately have to decide who they're going to hire as their next full-time GM in January, which really is just 2 months away at this point. Kind of crazy that we're, 9 weeks away from having a real GM again full-time. But Champ Kelly will definitely have a shot, and a lot of how he is judged by Ross and others is how he attacks the next 3 days before the November 4th NFL trade deadline. But let's get into some outside GM candidates. And the first one I wanted to bring up is Ray Agnew, the assistant GM of the Detroit Lions. This is a very popular name amongst Dolphins fans right now. Former NFL defensive lineman across a lot of different teams from 1990 to 2000. He got his initial start in the front office business, joining the Los Angeles Rams as a director of pro personnel in around 2016, and then jumped into the current position that he has as the assistant GM in Detroit in 2021. He has not interviewed for a GM job in the past. A lot of people were shocked that he didn't get an interview last year when there were a ton of cycles available, like the Jets and like the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars, or at least over the past couple of years, I should say. But the reason why Agnew intrigues me is because the Lions have drafted extremely well. He took over that associate head coach, that GM spot in 2021. Think about the draft picks they've had since that 21 draft. Aiden Hutchinson, Penei Sewell, Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Branch. The list goes on and on of impactful rookies, not only in the first 2 rounds, but also in rounds 4 and round 5. They've been very successful in the draft. So Agnew obviously has a key hand in that. Certainly an intriguing name to monitor. Ed Dodds is another one that a lot of people will be intrigued with, and he certainly has my attention, the current assistant GM of the Indianapolis Colts. He has been maybe the most popular name in GM interview circles over the past, I'd say, couple years, but he has not been hired. And a part of that is because he did not want to be hired, but maybe it's also something in the interview process. He began his career as an intern with the Oakland Raiders in 2003, then jumped into the Seattle Seahawks organization as a scout/personnel executive for about a decade, and then joined the Indianapolis Colts as the assistant GM and has held that position since 2018. He has been targeted for years. I mean, there is a laundry list of GM interviews for Mr. Dodds, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Tennessee Titans, all teams over the past 4 years that interviewed Ed Dodds and ultimately either went in a different direction because they did not like what Dodds brought to the table, or maybe Dodds ultimately backed out. Both can be true in those scenarios, but all I know is if you look up Ed Dodds GM, you will find a lot of fans and people wanting Dodds to be their next general manager. He's certainly a top option for the Miami Dolphins, and he has my attention. Who do you want to be the next general manager of the Miami Dolphins? Pin comment on today's show. Call your shot. Shout them out down in the comment section. Who do you want to be the next guy? How about an interesting name here that we've brought up in the past on the channel? Chad Alexander, the current assistant GM for the Los Angeles Chargers. Alexander is another name rising up the ranks in the GM world. He spent 5 years as the New York Jets director of player personnel, and prior to holding that position, he was a scout a long time for the Baltimore Ravens. He has ties with that Ravens organization, and he is believed to be one of the rising candidates in the sports industry. Like, I'm telling you, people believe this guy can be an absolute star as a GM in the National Football League. And if you look at the Los Angeles Chargers blogs going on right now on Sports Illustrated and independent sites, they already feel like it's a foregone conclusion that Alexander is gone. I'm serious. You look at some blogs, they already have replacement articles for Chad Alexander when they believe he inevitably leaves. And there was actually an article written today on the Chargers lead blog that detailed how Chad Alexander is the perfect fit for the Miami Dolphins to replace Chris Grier. That came out on Friday afternoon after the Dolphins mutually parted ways with Chris Grier. So many people in the media space, in the NFL world, believe Alexander is a rising candidate and is someone that Miami could target. And I do like the idea of bringing in Alexander. And if you do that, you would ideally think that he may consider taking Jesse Minter, the current defensive coordinator from the Chargers, with him and create kind of like a Chargers/Ravens type mindset in Miami, because they are built the same way, which, listen, I'll take that current build, absolutely, from the Chargers, and you could have a Minter head coach, and you could have Alexander as the GM. Couple more to get to here in a second, but this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The weather is certainly changing, but it never changes that it's nice to be right. So keep the season rolling on PrizePicks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. So simple to play. Just pick more or less than at least 2 player stats. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. PrizePicks offers injury reboots. If one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks will not count it as a loss. Great feature from good old PrizePicks. I got an entry in for this weekend's games. More than Christian McCaffrey receiving yards, more than George Kittle touchdowns, and more than Jackson Dart passing touchdowns. Feel pretty good about those 3 entries. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Another one here, Josh Williams, the first non-assistant GM on my list today, the director of pro scouting and player personnel for the San Francisco 49ers. And I actually have a little birdie telling me to keep an eye on Josh Williams. I'll say that. He joined the 49ers in the 2011 season as an assistant in the scouting department, rose up his ranks in the 49ers organization, and then ultimately became the current position that he has for the first time this year. And I should say that was in 2024, so this is his second season. That's on me for saying first season. His current role, as labeled on the website, directs pro and college scouting efforts, player development, and also assistant contract negotiations. And this is a guy who was a finalist for the Jacksonville Jaguars GM spot last year. The 3 finalists for the Jag spot, I believe, were Williams, Ian Cunningham, and then the guy who actually got it, who I'm spacing on it, unbelievable brain block there, that young bull who ultimately traded up to get Travis Hunter. Point I'm trying to make here, Josh Williams is someone who is thought of as a GM of the future. I like him a lot. I've been told to keep an eye on him from a source, so it's just something that I'm just going to tell and put you out right there. Like, Josh Williams is really a person to keep an eye on for Miami. Make sure you are subscribed, because we will have you updated every step of the way on the GM search to come in the next couple of months. And we also have daily content, and we'll be live for the trade deadline on Tuesday. So hit that sub button and join the channel today. The last name that I'll talk about in depth here is Ian Cunningham, the current assistant GM for the Chicago Bears. Another guy who has been just consistently mentioned as a next possible GM. He has been Ryan Poles' lead assistant in Chicago since 2022. He, prior to that, split time with the Baltimore Ravens and Philadelphia Eagles in 2008 to the 2021 time frame. And this was a guy in 2020 who, on a 40 under 40 in the sports industry, was on the list for The Athletic in 2020. So he's been someone that many people believe is just currently rising the ranks. And just like our guy Ed Dodds, we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, multiple GM interviews in the past. Cunningham, I mentioned it just a second ago, was a finalist for the Jacksonville Jaguars job. He interviewed for the Chargers job a couple years ago. The Titans, I believe. The Raiders, I believe, may have interviewed him as well in 2024. So Cunningham consistently mentioned as a top option, but he has never got a job. So it's a little interesting to see if he is really that good or if he just may be a sexy name that people like to talk to. All right, honorable mention here, Louis Riddick from ESPN. I wanted to mention him because I know a lot of you guys in the comments section will bring him up as a possibility. I think it would be a bad idea, and this is not an indictment on Louis Riddick. He has had experience working as a front office executive, director of player personnel for the Eagles in the past. But I just don't think it's smart to pull a guy who's been in the media and not working the phones, not in front offices for the last, 6, 7 years plus, probably. I don't remember when he started at ESPN, but I know it was relatively long ago. I think it was at least in 2019, 2020. Maybe I'm off on that. But I just feel as if Miami needs to hire someone who is going to be rock solid, stable, set a culture in Miami. I like Louis Riddick, the person, everything he preaches and talks about on ESPN. I get behind it. I love it. But I just want someone who's been in the business the last 5 years. So to me, I am not really in on Louis Riddick. So I wanted to actually quickly rank my top 5 guys for the Dolphins' current GM position as we currently sit. I would have Ed Dodds, number 1, the Indianapolis Colts assistant GM, Chad Alexander, 2, from the Chargers, Josh Williams from the Niners at 3, Ray Agnew from the Lions at 4, and then Ian Cunningham from the Bears at 5. Very early list. I don't even know if the Dolphins will interview all of these guys. I don't know if they would even be interviewed in Miami, but if they all were interviewed and interested, that is how I would rank it right now. Maybe it'll change, maybe it won't. But we'll have you covered every step of the way, and when the Dolphins ultimately hire GM in January, we will go live for that like we did when they fired Chris Grier. So hit that sub button and join the channel today.